Hello, this is a preview of GPX Magic version 3. I'm making an early version available for test. I think there's enough functionality here to be useful, and it will be great to get some feedback. Now let's have a quick look at what is different in here. Well, first of all, there's a splash screen which we're going to use to display some important information. So we have currently 4 of the views. We do not have the first person view yet. We have a plan view, which is as ever looking straight down on the track. We have the perspective view, which you're probably familiar with, which you can rotate and zoom. You can zoom in with the plus button, zoom out with the minus button. You can use the mouse wheel, and you can reset the view. Thus, we have the map view, which again is the same map. Use the mouse wheel, plus and minus buttons to zoom. And also, as before, if you see these crossed arrows, you should be able to move a point by dragging it on the map. And you notice that pop up in the undo. So we can undo those 2 things. So we have those 4 views. A first person view will be coming fairly soon. Now, around the edge here, you can see that there's a white margin. There are 5 areas where you can put controls. I emphasize the U. It's up to you where you put the controls. You can change the size of these boxes. You can switch where these things go by clicking on the wheel and moving that, for instance, to bottom left, to bottom tray, to bottom right, to top right, and back to top left. And you can also change the color, which we'll come back to later. So let's have a look and see what we have in the controls area. We have the visual display options. That's a simplified version, but it's more or less what we had before. You can turn the colored curtain into a plain curtain. Colored shows the gradients. There aren't many on this course, or you can turn that off completely. You can show the road surface or turn it off. If the road surface is on, you can either show the center line, which is colored by gradient, or you can turn that off. And you can show the wonderful green ground plane or not. So you can have pretty much nothing at all, or something more familiar perhaps to what you were used to before. So tools, you click on the title to open them and to close them. The information box combines a couple of things that were separate before. So there's information about the whole track here, or there's information about the current point, and that will change as we move around. And of course you'll notice that as before, the orange point is remaining centered. I can change that behavior by clicking the padlock, and then the orange point will move around and the track will not move. And then if I decide to go back to having it centered, I click on the padlock again. Sorry I didn't mention the profile view. It's zoomable. It shows you the current marker, and the horizontal line helps you read off the altitude of 33 there, and the gradient in this case of 0. Makes it quite easy to spot errant. You can see there's a bit of a kink in the curve there. I'm afraid that clicking on this isn't quite right yet, and when you zoom in very close, it tends to get a bit confused. But essentially quite a nice way of getting an overview and easily locating altitude and gradient problems. Going back to this information tab, the final point there is we've got a window on the memory. Many of the problems in earlier versions are caused by running out of memory. You can see we have 2 gigabytes to play with, and this is a small track, so it's only using 80, 70 megs, depends how many views you've got open and how many track points you have. That memory can be used up quite quickly by a complex track and complex graphics. Talking of which, let's look at the layout option. I only have 1 window open. I could switch that to having 2 windows open. The first window only can contain the map, so I can have those side by side. I can have 1 up, 1 down. Probably better to make a bit more space for that. Or I can have 4 open, which allows me to have a combination of all of the views open at the same time. Some can be zoomed in, so I can have different perspective views or different levels of zooming. to suit. The plan view does not rotate, that is intentional. Notice the layout is saved, and the tools layout and the tools colors are also saved, so that if I reload the program and reload that route, your environment should come back pretty much the way it was, although you may have to zoom in and adjust your angle of view slightly. So what's moved across functionality wise? Well, we just put these direction changes over here. So it tells us where a single point, the direction at a change at a single point exceeds that threshold. And if I click on that, sequentially I can move through those and have a look at them. So you can see that something actually quite serious going on in this particular course. If I change the tab color, the little circle on the preview will also change, and that can be quite useful if you've got two of these things open at the same time. So I've got gradient problems here and bend problems open. I can distinguish those problems from one another. We have delete functionality. Problem with these nasty changes is simply duplication of points. So in fact, if I just look at that bend there, I can see there's actually 2 points in a row there. Click, click, it stays there. If I delete one of those points, that particular problem will go away. Bezier in action. If I'm going through the existing points, the tension is quite important, because if I have too much tension, the points go everywhere. And if I don't have any tension at all, I just get a reconstruction of the original track. So you need to choose something that's approaching what you think you need in that particular case. Or you can use the approximation, in which case the tension has no effect at all, but the tolerance just controls the spacing, and that can, in many cases, give more pleasing outcomes. So that's Bezier. Centroid average. Again, you get a preview. Weighting reduces the effect of the smoothing, and you can choose to apply it to both position and altitude, or just the altitude, or just the position, or if you want to waste your time, to neither. And again, that can apply to a range or to the whole track. So that does the fairly effective smoothing operation. Okay, we also have radius bends. This one helps you to apply an exact radius. So here I've got 6 point, well, you can see what I'm doing here. I'm changing the radius and the points are moving. If I increase the spacing, it's easier to see what's going on. Sorry, increase the number of points by decreasing the spacing, and the joining radius changes how that bend rejoins the existing track. It's quite good fun to use that on roundabouts. We have the classic bend smoother. So just sticking with this particular track, if I drop a marker somewhere and change the color of that so it's easier to see, and reduce the spacing, that works in the classic way. As I move the marker around, it keeps seeking a solution for the bend between the orange and the purple markers. A nudge. This is unchanged, works between the markers. I can nudge vertically, and I can nudge horizontally, and I can apply a fade so that we get a smoother transition between the nudged area and the track. That doesn't create any track points, it just removes the track points. You need to be careful when you're moving towards the inside of a bend, because you can get overlap of those points sometimes, which is best avoided. Out and back has moved across, a very simple tool. That creates a loop with a radius turn at the far end and a radius turn at the near end, so that you can easily create loops in Magic Roads. Well, just delete the start to finish loop if you don't want to do complete loops. If I set the slider on the other side, that will go around the other way. Simplify, as before, will remove the points. Let's just see which ones it's removing. Yeah, so identifies points which have the least contribution overall to the shape of the track, so they're effectively just noise. So you can usually safely remove those without upsetting the track too much, until after a while you'll find that the track quality starts to degrade, as you can see. The main use for that is on real life tracks where you have basically a lot of noise from your GPS recording, and we have interpolate, which again we can apply between the markers, so that will add a number of track points to make sure that at no point the spacing is always going to be 4 meters or closer, depending on the existing spacing. And it can be useful to do that, for instance, before you do centroid smoothing. So quick summary, moved across so far. There's information, track point memory, there's the display options, direction changes and gradient problems, and then for editing there's delete points, Bezier splines, interpolation, simplify to remove noise from IRL roads, out and back, nudge, radius bends, formerly curve smoother, classic bend smoother, centroid average. Undo and redo is the same, it's become a tool now so you can move it around, and the marker is orange and purple as before. Coming soon will be, let's have a look at our to-do list. So we have one click quick fix, then I think in this order roughly, limiting of gradients, that's the distribution of excessive gradients among the rest of the track to keep you, for instance, less than 20%. The detection of intersections and possibly loops, fly through, which requires the first person view, move and stretch, which is pretty good for pulling hairpins apart where you want to do a switchback and the bends are a little bit too tight, for magic roads. Graph theory needs some work, might be pushed down the list a bit. Importing Strava segments in terms of the altitude profile, stuff around loops and where you need to apply looping tools where you need to apply tools to the entire loop, lift and shift, which is relocating a track elsewhere on the earth, that's a requirement for doing SVG import, and then maybe adding visually the terrain, the ability to choose a different style of map, and then finally split and join, where you want to aggregate 2 GPX files together or split one big one into lots of small ones. And then some visual niceties, and say there's a whole list of other stuff to come. The priorities are kind of up for discussion, so if you've got any favourites, please let me know. If you get a chance to play with version 3, please do. I'd be interested to know how you find it in terms of performance and so forth. I generally find that it's pretty stable on some of these larger tracks. So, you know, for instance, here is a 60,000 point track. It's using 219 megabytes. That might go up slightly if I increase the number of displays I have open, not very much. I can do a challenging edit on that, like maybe do an out and back. So if I make an out and back course on that, nice long track into an even longer track with 120,000 points, and that is now using 400 megabytes out of the 2 gigabytes available. And as you can see, the controls are going to be a little bit sluggish because it's dealing with a lot more data, but seems to be holding up. So interested to see how you get on with this, and yeah, have fun. Thank you very much for spending time.